Okay. Good evening.
Evening.
Here we are again. Flown by this year, hasn't it?
Jesus,
I did give some thought to, giving like a funny monologue or whatever, but I've decided against it because I know who your guest speaker is. So I'm going to leave that out. So welcome along to the Run the Moors Championship Awards Ceremony Evening Jobby 2025. It's been a cracking year. Loads of opportunity this evening to sort of celebrate everybody's achievements. Pat each other on the back and all that sort of stuff. I'm going to walk you through it a little bit, but very simply, we're going to have a guest speaker for you, which we'll talk about in a moment. We're going to have some grub pies, the cornerstone of fell running. Anyone who's done Langdale knows that. And then we will obviously do some awards and stuff like that, and have a few drinks along the way. So hope you've all got a drink. We'll get stuck in. Me doing this is a lot like a fell run. It'll go downhill quickly, and I'll end up trying to stay stood up towards the end. Boom. Okay, so without further ado, we'll move it on. So your guest speaker this evening, you've probably seen the poster. He's a very shy, retiring fella. If you don't know him, he don't like talking about himself, so we are pretty lucky this evening for him to come out and do so. I've spent a lot of hours in the Clag listening to his stories, so I do know you are all in for a treat. And in all truth, there isn't much you don't know about fell running in the UK. He's a good coach, he's a good mate, and he's a proper fell runner. Ian Warrington.
Good evening, ladies and gents. I'm going to start standing on the stage because I'm a bit of a short ass. Thank you very much for having me tonight at the Run the Moors presentation evening. I was both honoured and a little bit nervous when I was asked to do it, more so because I was asked by Ian. Now, me and Ian are mates, and until I've just stepped on this stage right now, I wasn't quite sure this wasn't just one of his elaborate pranks. So last year you had Chris Holdsworth, and Chris is an absolute Premier League of the fell and trail running scene. He's represented GB, he's represented England, but most importantly, he's represented Lancashire. Now, if Chris was a vehicle, I would probably put him as a Ferrari. He's an absolute sports star. And then you've got me. If Chris is a Ferrari, I'm more like a rusty old Massey Ferguson tractor. It takes me a little while to get going. I've got a big engine. It takes me a few smacks and then I'll go, and I'm usually reliable enough to get the job done. So I'm hoping over the next 20 minutes or so, I'm not going to bore you too much, and then the pies will arrive. So who am I and why am I stood here on this stage in front of you lot tonight? So my name's Ian Warrington, if you don't know me. I'm a runner, I'm a coach, and apparently now I'm a public speaker. I run for Achille Ratti and also Bury AC, where I coach senior endurance. And I also own my own running company called New Limits Run Coaching. Now, those two words, New Limits, they're kind of my ethos for my entire life, because none of us have got no limits. Like, I can't make you run 30 miles an hour, but I can take you a little bit, and myself, we can find our new limits somewhere. If we put our mind to it, we can all do incredible things. So, as with all good stories, I should probably start at the start. Now, I'm not talking about when Mr. and Mrs. Warrington in 1983 had a few too many blue nuns and my dad put his favourite Lionel Richie album on. I'm talking about my start of my running journey. So, I was never very good at sport when I was a kid. I played a little bit of football in my late teens and my early 20s. I was never really good at it. And I was often described on the pitch as a gobshite. So you can only imagine what those 15-stone monstrosities used to do to me when I tried to give them a little bit of SH1T as I was running up and down the wing. So after I got folded in half about 6 or 7 times across the season, I thought I'd better find a new sport. And I did. And the new sport that I found was called PlayStation. So if PlayStation and smoking 30 cigs a day and eating takeaways 3 times a week was an Olympic sport, then I'd probably have more goals than Sir Mo Farah. So I'm going to take this talk dark for about 30 seconds, and I promise I'll try and bring it back. So in 2013, I lost my granddad to cancer. I'm going to step down because I feel like really high. So I lost my granddad to cancer, and it was lung cancer that got him. So obviously with it being the big C, the SIGs had to go. And my granddad was my absolute hero. I worshipped him. So when the SIGs went, I replaced them with extra food. So when I ran out of notches on my belt to hold my trousers up, I thought I better try sport again. And I heard about this sport called running. And I thought, I'll have a go at that because it's really cheap and inexpensive, right? So I went for a run outside my house, and I used to live in a cul-de-sac, and there was only 20 houses on my street. And I ran to the end of the cul-de-sac, and my lungs felt like they were turned inside out. So I went back home, I soaked a little bit, and I did the only thing that was sensible for someone that's run once. I signed up for Manchester Marathon and tried to raise some money for Bury Hospice because they looked after my granddad before he passed away. So this is August, and the marathon is April. So I trained really, really hard for that marathon, and I did 6 or 7 runs up and down Manchester Road near where I live. Race day comes, and I did what every single new marathon runner does. I set off far too fast, and by 10K, I was smoked. And I was chafing in parts that I didn't even know existed on my own body. But I persevered, and I carried on, and I finished. And when I was drinking that pint of alcohol-free, isotonic, whatever it is, lager that they give you at the end of Manchester Marathon, I thought, where do we go from here? You know, I've gone from being a non-runner to a marathon runner. You know, what's the next step? So after a couple of weeks, when I could actually walk again, I joined my local running club, and at the time, my local running club was Ratcliffe AC. I had a very good time at Ratcliffe AC. I had many, many years, and I've still got a lot of love for most of them. And we had a guy at Ratcliffe AC, and he was called Mark Cartwright, and it's Donna, the chair of Ratcliffe, it's her husband. And Mark used to do this thing this time of year when it started to go dark. He used to do Cartwright's mystery tours. Now, I don't know if you know where Ratcliffe is, but we've got some lovely, lovely trails behind the old clubhouse now. It's National Cycle Route 6, perfect trails. They're so groomed, like amazing. If you've ever done 13 Arches, you'll know what I'm talking about. Now, I love Mark, but he's got this medical condition. I don't know what it's technically called, but he's allergic to every single type of path. So every Monday night, we'd go out with our head torches, and he'd just send us through every bramble bush, every bog, every muddy puddle he could find. And we'd come home scratched, covered in blood, covered in mud, soaked wet through. And I just thought, this is for me. You know, like, unlike the road. Now, don't get me wrong, I run everything. I've run a mile to 100 mile. I even did the steeplechase last year on the track. If I had a camera there that night, we wouldn't have to do this talk. You could just watch that, it was amazing. And so, like, talking to Mark, I got into fell running, and fell running's ace, but I soon found out that my niche was going really long, because quite simply, I'm not fast enough to keep up with the whippersnappers who do 10K races. So I did a few trail marathons, I did a few ultras, and then I heard of this race called the Lakeland 100 and Lakeland 50. Now I can hear eyes rolling already, because if you know me and you're my mate, you know that I don't shut up about the Lakeland weekend. To me, the Lakeland weekend is just the best weekend of the year. These days, there's 2,000 people that descend on Coniston, and they're all there for the same thing. They just want to run up hills, they want to have a laugh with their mates, and they want to have a beer at presentation. And for me, that's what running's about. So in 2018, I got a place for the 50. So the 50 mile, the 50 is 50 miles and 10,000 feet of climb, and the 100 is 105 and 20,000 feet. And I did okay at the 50, I ran 9.5 hours. I'd never gone anything that long. And as I finished, I went into the marquee, and it just so happened that the race director was there. So I walked over and I shook his hand and I said, "Mark, thanks for the adventure, but you will never, ever see me at this race again." And I can still remember it now. If I close my eyes, I can still see his bloody face. And he just looked at me and he went, "Ian, I'll see you next year for the 100. And I thought, this lad's crackers. But he's not crackers. He's an absolute genius. Because what Mark does is, like, Lakeland is always the last weekend in July, but he doesn't open entries until first week of September. And very much like childbirth or a kick in the nuts, by September you forgot how awful it was, you know, how wet you were, how many blisters you've got, how awful those descents were. And you just remember the good times with your mates, and you're having a laugh and you're having a pint. So as with pretty much all decisions in my life, I may or may not have had a couple of glasses of Malbec. And I thought, bugger it, I'm going for the 100. So fast forward 2019, and I'm stood. So the 100 starts at 6 p.m. on the Friday evening, and I'm stood on the start line, and I don't know what took over me, but as the gun went, I just went off like a rocket. And like, there's a picture somewhere of me leading the top 10 out, and and these are like the Premier League of trail and fell running, and then there's me. And it's like going out like a 5K, and as most of you have probably guessed, that didn't go too well for me. And by the top of the first climb, I was absolutely goosed. And I'd done a little bit of runner's maths, as we've probably all done before. So I did the 50 in 9.5, so I thought we'd double it. We had a little bit. I'm definitely doing sub 24 hours for that Lakeland 100. No problem. 31 hours. 31 hours, ladies and gents. But I very, very nearly didn't see the sunrise for the Saturday morning. So I managed to get to Blencathra, and I couldn't eat because I'd set off so fast. If you've never done an ultra, they're just eating competitions. So if you can't eat, you ain't completing. It's just as simple as that. And I got to Blencathra, and every time I tried to eat something, I was just throwing it back up. And all the checkpoints at Lakeland, the fancy dress. So if you don't like clowns, I probably wouldn't go. Apart from me, I probably wouldn't go to Lakeland, because there's always a checkpoint that's clowns. But Blencathra this year, it was rock stars, and I was met outside Blencathra checkpoint at 5 a.m. So 5 a.m. is really important. Remember that bit. I was met outside by Freddie Mercury. Now I love Freddie. You know, Queen are probably one of my favourite rock bands ever. And I just looked at him and I went, "Freddie, I love Bohemian Rhapsody, mate, but I'm done. You know, I don't want any more of this race." So Freddie took me by the hand and he walked me into the checkpoint, and he gave me to one of the female volunteers, and she said to me, very much like FRA, you've got to carry kit for ultras, and one of the parts of the kit is a cup. So as I sat down, the lady said to me, "Do you drink?" And now this is 5 a.m. So I'm like, yeah, you know, I'm thinking like tea or coffee. And she said, "Whiskey or rum?" And I'm like, am I having an out-of-body experience here or what? So there's only one logical answer. So I said whiskey, because I'm not a sailor. So she wandered off, and she came back with a piece of toast in one hand and my cup in the other, half full of whiskey. And she went, "We don't have DNFs at Blencathra, so eat this and drink that and get out of my checkpoint." So I don't know if it's because I was blottoed, but I stood up and I carried on, and 20 hours later, I finished my first Lakeland 100 in 31 hours. Now, I'll tell you one more Lakeland story, and then I promise that I'll move on. My second Lakeland 100, me and my better half had only just started dating, and she signed up for the 50, and I was on the 100 again. And I give it Billy Big Bananas. And it's like, so the 100 starts at 6 a.m. on the Friday night, and the 50 starts Saturday at like 11 o'clock. So I'm like, "I'll meet you at halfway. We'll run round, don't you worry. I'll pace you around to your 50. I'm a professional athlete. I've done this before. So anyway, I get to Dale Main where they start, and my feet had better ideas, and they were shot. It had been super wet overnight, and they were macerated. I've got pictures if anyone wants to see. Just come and find me at the bar later. And we basically had to death march 40 miles back home into Coniston. Now, bearing in mind my better half, she'd give up her entire race to look after me and hold my hand. With 800 metres to go, I sat down in the copper mines at Coniston and I started crying. And I said, you know, I can't do this anymore. She's laughing because she knows it's true. I said, I can't do this anymore. I'm DNFing. You go on without me. Now, bearing in mind, she'd sacrificed her entire race to walk me, and I'm giving up 800 metres to go. Now, my better half is Irish, and she's about this big. Now, I don't know if you've ever met an Irish lady, but you probably don't want to cross them. And you can only imagine the fire and brimstone. She's looking at me, I have it. You can only imagine the fire and brimstone that come out of her gob. And she may or may not have politely told me to get up. And I got up. And maybe it was fear, maybe it was adrenaline, but it was the fastest 800 metres I've ever done in my entire life. And that's pretty much my story of the entire Lakeland 100. Apart from my first one, I did 4 where my mates would look after me on the first half and Sarah would look after me on the second half. And whenever I tell people these stories, they always say to me, Ian, if you hated it so much and you had such a bad time, why'd you go back? Why did you do 5? And I've brought something to show you. So if you do 5, you get one of these. So it's a slate that it says that you're a Lakeland 500 legend. Now, I'm a bit of a magpie. And when I saw that, I was like, I've got to have one of them in my life. Now, I may or may not have spent more money getting that than actually buying Honest the Slate Mine. But what makes it even better is none of my mates have got one of them. So to me, it's worth its weight in gold. And then we go to the Dragon's Back. So just have a beer because this is not my full-time job. So the Dragon's Back, for those of you who don't know, it's a 6-day multi-stage race from Conway Castle at the top of Wales to Cardiff Castle at the bottom. And it's 240 miles and it's about 55,000 feet of climb. So for reference, Everest is 33. All my mates know that because I tell them every other week. Now, I'm not going to bore you with a step-by-step and a day-by-day montage of Dragon's Back because there's loads of videos on YouTube that you can go and watch. But be very careful of those videos on YouTube because the marketing team at Aurea Events are absolute lying baskets. So they show you videos of like the sun shining, people are coming in the daytime, camp life's mint. I saw one guy sunbathing. You know, everyone's having food, they're having laughs. There was none of that for me. None. It pretty much held it down for the entire week. But Dragons is not all bad. I'm probably doing it a little bit of a disservice. But I did share a tent with 7 other blokes that I didn't know. And one of them could do a really, really good impersonation of a jet engine every time he went to sleep. It was brilliant. So anyway, Dragons is probably the first race that I ever did that I probably thought was a little bit too big for me. And on day 1, you've got to go up Crib Goch. Now, if you don't know what Crib Goch is, it's that horrible ridge line at the side of Snowdon. Now, I'm not really a fan of heights, and I'm not really a fan of ridge lines. And on my climb up to it, I fell and I smashed my face. Now, not that you can really tell with this mush, but I didn't really do too much damage, but it really gave me a bit of a kick up the backside. And I thought, you know, and I ended up finishing Dragons 2 hours later, day 1, than what I thought I would do. Now, as with probably most of yous, I've got a group chat with all my fell running mates, and there's some of them sat in this room now, and I haven't told them this yet, but I didn't have very good phone signal, but I kept sporadically checking my phone, and I know now that it was purely care and love, but at the time, like, there was messages going round going, what's happened to Ian? What's he doing? And I thought, maybe, like, they don't think I'm good enough to be there either. And which is absolute rubbish, you know, like, my mates and my family, and they all know, they sat here, they know I'll do anything for them. But at that time, I thought, what am I doing here? You know, I'm supposed to be a professional coach. The business is going to go up in smoke. You know, let's go home. So I got into the tent at night time, and I got in my sleeping bag next to Mr. Jet 2. And I text my missus, and I said, like, I don't think I belong here, but I'm going to have a sleep, make a decision in the morning. Now, I'd recce day 2, and I quite like the route. It covers a lot of the Paddy Buckley round, like the long leg if you've ever done it. And I really had a good day. And I got into camp, and I was in a much better mood. And I thought, well, I'll just crack on until someone goes, Ian, you can't carry on no more. I'll just keep going. And one of the best things about Dragons is you get something called Dragons Mail. And Dragons Mail is basically everyone wears a tracker, and you can see where we are across the week. But you can send them messages, and I got loads of messages from my friends, from my missus, from my family, you know, like telling me I was awesome and like I was doing really well, and sending me really shit jokes. Now, if you never met me before, dad jokes are high society to me. I love a dad joke. If you've ever been on the fells or the trails with me, you probably wanted to strangle me at least once that I've told you an absolute rubbish dad joke. But there's one message that stood out, and I'm probably going to choke up a little bit because it gets me every time. I got a message from a 7-year-old lad that I didn't know, and he just he sent the message, and he said, like, you've been running near my dad today, but my dad's pulled out, so I'm going to follow you instead. And I thought, nice one. Yeah, you know, now I've got to carry on, Anna. So anyway, I used that lad as fuel for the rest of the week, and I found his dad after the race on Facebook. So to cut a really long story short, I managed to complete the Dragons back, and I managed to get to Cardiff Castle. I even managed a sprint finish. I beat it to the finish. It was mint. And I found his dad on Facebook, and I just sent him a message and said, like, you know, tell your little lad, thank you very much from me, and never ever underestimate the power of a nice word. And so I got my dragon. So this is my dragon, and it's tradition to name your dragon. So all year as I was training, I thought I was going to name my dragon something proper scary, you know, like Rio Mega Ego, like the Menacer, or Dragon McDragon's Face. But I ended up calling my dragon Diolch. So Diolch means thank you in Welsh. So this dragon, it's not really mine, I just look after it. It's all the volunteers, it's all my mates who help me on the recce's, it's my missus for like letting me disappear for every weekend for a year and just spending an absolute fortune to be really, really selfish and run the length of Wales. And this dragon is that little 7-year-old lad who said thank you to, you know, who wished me really well and he trusted me. And I should probably post it to him, but he can have this out of my cold, dead hands. So all these stories that I've told you this evening, I just want you to know that I'm just a normal bloke. You know, I'm a working class lad from Whitefield, and all these big adventures and these big races that I've done, they're not for the elites. They're for all of us. You know, they're not just for people who look like Killian Jornet or Courtney Dauwalter or name somebody. You know, they're for all of us. So maybe, you know, they're for me, they're for you, they're maybe not for Ian, but so maybe if you're still a runner and you're uncertain, when we leave tonight, why don't you enter that race that scares you a little bit? You know, that one that you think maybe is not for me. Just enter it and have a go. You know, go out and find your new limits. And on that note, I'm going to say, Diolch, thank you very much for having me, and hopefully the pies are here.
Well done, buddy.
Thank you.
Ian Warrington.